The notification arrived at 0600 hours ship time, with the cold efficiency that characterized everything about life aboard the New Haven. Callan. Reeves stared at the holographic display floating above his bunk. The alien text automatically translating into stark English. Bonding assignment complete. Report to Bay 7. Guardian. IYARA Kes harmonic dot around him. The refugee quarters buzzed with similar notifications. Humans checking their assignments, some relieved, others terrified. The lottery was over. After 6 months in quarantine, aboard the massive Kithara vessel, they were finally being claimed. Lucky bastard, muttered Jenkins from the adjacent bunk. His own notification showed he'd been assigned to someone with 17 syllables in their name. 9th harmonic means she's young. Probably won't try to rewire your brain on day 1. Callan pulled on his standard-issue jumpsuit, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. Through the viewport, the Kithara homeworld of Neshan Prime sprawled beneath them, crystal spires that sang in harmonious frequencies, living cities that pulsed with bioluminescent rhythm. Beautiful and utterly alien. Bay 7 was smaller than he'd expected, more intimate. The other bonding ceremonies he'd witnessed had been grand affairs in the ship's main halls, with dozens of Kithara observers and elaborate telepathic rituals. This felt almost private. She stood in the center of the bay, and Callan's first thought was that something was wrong. The other Kithara he'd seen were tall, ethereal beings with elongated limbs and faces that seemed carved from starlight. Iara was different. Shorter, more solid, with darker skin that held traces of deep blue rather than the typical silver white. Her eyes were wrong, too. Instead of the usual luminous gold, hers were deep violet, almost human in their directness. Callan. Reeves, she said, and her voice carried none of the musical quality that made other Kithara speech sound like wind chimes. It was rougher, more immediate. I am Iara. I have chosen you. The words hit him like a physical blow. Not assigned or selected chosen. As if she'd had a say in the matter. As if this wasn't just another bureaucratic necessity. I don't understand, he said. The liaison officer told us the pairings were based on psychological compatibility matrices. That it was all computed. It was. Her lips curved in what might have been a smile. I volunteered for you specifically. The ritual that followed was simpler than he'd expected. No telepathic probing, no mind-melding ceremony. Iara simply placed her hand over his heart and spoke words in her own language. He felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, like drinking hot coffee on a cold morning, but nothing more dramatic than that. Is that it? He asked. The bond is formed, she replied. You are mine now, and I am yours. Where you go, I go. What threatens you? Threatens me. This is the law of sanctuary. There was something in the way she said those last words, as if she were quoting from memory rather than speaking from belief. But before he could ask, she was already turning toward the bay's exit. Come, she said. We have much to discuss, and little time for it. The Wanderer's dream departs for the outer colonies in 3 hours. Wait, we're leaving? Already? She paused, glancing back at him with those unsettling violet eyes. For just a moment, her composed expression flickered, and he caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like hunger. Did you think you would stay here on Neshan Prime? She asked. This world is for full Kithara only. Bonded pairs are sent to the frontier where your unique qualities can be of use. Unique qualities. That was a polite way of saying psychically toxic. Callan had heard the briefings. Unbonded humans drove most alien species into homicidal rage just by existing in their vicinity. Even bonded, they were considered dangerous, unpredictable. Useful for colonization work precisely because so few other species could tolerate their presence. "I see," he said. "No," Iara replied, already walking again. "You do not, but you will." As he followed her through the ship's corridors, Callan couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The other bonded pairs he glimpsed seemed to move in perfect synchronization, the human slightly behind, deferential. But Iara walked beside him as an equal, and when their hands accidentally brushed, she didn't flinch away from the contact. Most disturbing of all was the way she kept glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Not with the patient tolerance he'd expected from a guardian assigned to babysit a dangerous refugee, but with an intensity that made his skin crawl, like she was studying him, like she was planning something. The Wanderer's dream was nothing like the massive confederation vessels Callan had grown accustomed to. This was a frontier ship, smaller, more utilitarian, with corridors that hummed with barely contained energy and viewports that showed the raw stars without any atmospheric filtering. It reminded him, painfully, of the mining ships he'd worked on before Earth's destruction. Their quarters were a single room with 2 sleeping alcoves, a shared workspace, and a small hygiene unit. Spartan, even by refugee standards. Iara moved through the space with practiced efficiency, unpacking what appeared to be her entire life's possessions. A few changes of clothing, several data crystals, and a small device that looked like a cross between a tuning fork and a surgical instrument. "What's that?" Callan asked, nodding toward the device. "Resonance calibrator," she said without looking up, "for monitoring the bond between us. Standard equipment for all guardians. And you need to monitor it because—" She paused in her unpacking, her violet eyes meeting his directly. "Because human emotions are chaotic. They spike and flux in ways that can destabilize the neural patterns of nearby telepaths. The calibrator helps me ... adjust." It was a reasonable explanation. It even matched what he'd been told in the orientation sessions. So why did it feel like a lie? The ship's intercom crackled to life, announcing their departure in 3 languages: Cathara, Federation Standard, and something that sounded like musical mathematics. Through their small viewport, Callan watched Dishan Prime fall away, its crystal cities growing smaller until they were just points of light against the planet's curve. "Have you ever been to the colonies before?" he asked. "No." Iara settled into the room's single chair, the resonance calibrator now resting in her lap. "This is my first assignment as a guardian." That surprised him. Most of the other guardians he'd met had been older, more experienced. Some had been bonded to humans for decades. "How did you get approved for guardian duty so young?" "I tested well," she said, but there was something evasive in her tone. "And there are not many volunteers for frontier work. Because it's dangerous?" "Because it's boring," she replied, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Most Cathara prefer the intellectual stimulation of the core worlds. They find colonial life beneath them. But not you?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the calibrator's surface. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more thoughtful. "I have always been different from other Cathara. What they find overwhelming, I find intriguing. What they consider chaos, I see as ... potential." There was something in the way she said it that made Callan's chest tighten. He found himself studying her profile, noting the subtle differences that set her apart from her people. The way she held herself with a kind of careful tension, as if she were constantly aware of being watched. The way her eyes never quite settled on anything for long, always scanning, always alert. "Iara," he said carefully, "what aren't you telling me?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a heartbeat he saw something raw and vulnerable in her expression. But it was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "There are things about the bonding process that humans are not told," she said finally. things that would frighten you unnecessarily. The important thing is that you are safe now. As long as you remain bonded to me, no other species in the galaxy will be able to harm you. And if something happens to you, her hand tightened on the calibrator, nothing will happen to me. But even as she said it, Callan caught the lie. There was something hunted in her posture, something that spoke of constant vigilance. Whatever Iara was hiding, it was bigger than just the details of their bond. The intercom crackled again, this time with a message specifically for them. They were to report to the ship's medical bay for a routine compatibility assessment, standard procedure for new bonded pairs. I should warn you, Iara said as they made their way through the ship's corridors. The medical staff may ask invasive questions about your thoughts, your dreams, your emotional responses to various stimuli. It is important that you answer honestly. Why? Because lies create discord in the bond. And discord? She stopped walking, turning to face him with an expression of sudden intensity. Discord between a human and their guardian can be lethal to both parties. The medical bay was a sterile white space filled with equipment Callan didn't recognize. The ship's doctor was a Kithara who introduced himself as Healer Voss. Though unlike Iara, he radiated the typical ethereal calm of his species. His golden eyes studied them both with professional interest. An unusual pairing, he murmured, consulting a holographic display. Ninth harmonic bonded to a trauma survivor. How are you finding the adjustment, human Callan? Fine, Callan said, though he wasn't sure it was true. No problem so far. And you, Iara? Any irregularities in the bond resonance? Iara's hand moved unconsciously to the calibrator at her belt. None. The human's emotional patterns are manageable. Healer Voss made a note on his display, but his expression remained thoughtful. I see. Well, you'll be pleased to know that your destination, colony designation Kepler 442b, has had excellent success rates with human Kithara partnerships. The work there is challenging, but rewarding terraforming operations. Mineral extraction, establishment of sustainable ecosystems. What kind of challenges? Callan asked. Oh, the usual frontier difficulties. Harsh weather, equipment failures, occasional contact with unaffiliated alien species. The healer's tone was casual, but Callan caught the way Iara tensed at the last point. Nothing that properly bonded pairs cannot handle. As they left the medical bay, Callan found himself walking closer to Iara than strictly necessary. The conversation had left him unsettled, full of questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. But one thing was becoming clear. Whatever was happening between them, it was more complicated than a simple guardian-ward relationship. And despite the fear gnawing at his gut, he found himself strangely excited by that complexity. 3 days into their journey, Callan woke to find Iara gone, not just absent from her sleeping alcove, completely missing from their quarters. The resonance calibrator lay abandoned on the small table, its surface dark and silent. In the dim emergency lighting, their shared space felt suddenly vast and threatening. He pulled on his clothes and stepped into the corridor, unsure where to begin looking. The wanderer's dream was larger than it appeared from their quarters, a maze of service passages and communal areas that he'd barely begun to explore. Most of the ship's inhabitants were asleep, and the few crew members he encountered gave him polite but distant nods. He found her in the observation deck, a small compartment near the ship's bow with a wraparound viewport that offered an unobstructed view of hyperspace. She stood pressed against the transparent aluminum, her palm flat against its surface, watching the impossible colors that swirled beyond. Couldn't sleep? He asked softly. She didn't turn around. Kithara don't sleep the way humans do. We enter a meditative state that allows our minds to process the day's telepathic impressions. But you're not meditating. No. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not. Callan moved to stand beside her, careful not to crowd her space. This close, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her free hand clenched and unclenched. At her side, what's wrong? Everything, she said, and the word came out like a confession. Everything is wrong, Callan. This bond, this mission, this pretense that I can be something I'm not. The raw pain in her voice made his chest tighten. Without thinking, he reached out and placed his hand over hers where it rested against the viewport. She flinched at the contact, but didn't pull. Away. What do you mean? For a long moment, she was silent. Then, so quietly, he had to strain to hear her. I'm not Kithara. The words hit him like a physical blow. What? I'm not Kithara, she repeated, turning to face him for the first time. In the swirling light from hyperspace, her violet eyes looked almost black. I'm Nihili. We were a parasitic species that fed on telepathic energy. The Kithara hunted us to near extinction 3 centuries ago. Callan stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she was telling him. That's impossible. You went through the bonding ceremony. You have the credentials, the false identity, genetic modification, years of preparation. Her voice was steady now, almost clinical. There are perhaps a dozen of us left, scattered across the galaxy. I was sent to infiltrate Kithara society by claiming a human mate. Why? The question came out harsher than he'd intended. Because bonded guardians have access to everything. Military installations, government databases, the most sensitive telepathic research facilities. My people believe that if we can understand how the Kithara maintain their psychic dominance, we can find a way to overthrow them. Callan pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. So this whole thing, the bond, the partnership, everything you've said to me, it's all been a lie? Yes. The word was barely audible. And what happens to me when you complete your mission? When you get what you came for? Ira's composure finally cracked. Her hands came up to cover her face, and her shoulders began to shake. I don't know. I thought ... I thought I knew. But now ... Now what? Now I don't know what I am anymore. She lowered her hands, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. Another impossibility, since Kithara didn't cry. My people chose me for this mission, because I was defective. Other Nihali can feed on telepathic energy directly, but I've always been ... broken. I can sense emotions, but I can't consume them. I was useless to our survival. So they sent you on a suicide mission. They sent me to do something useful for. Once, her laugh was bitter. But being around you, feeling your emotions without being able to feed on them ... It's changing me. I'm starting to experience things I've never felt before. Guilt, affection, something that might be love? The word slipped out before he could stop it. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. I don't know if what I'm feeling is real or just another form of parasitism. How can I trust my own emotions when they're all tangled up with yours? Callan found himself moving closer to her, drawn by an impulse he didn't fully understand. Maybe that's what makes them real. Maybe love is supposed to be tangled up. You should hate me, she whispered. You should report me to the ship's security and have me arrested. I've deceived you, endangered you, used you for my own purposes. Yeah, he said, reaching up to brush a tear from her cheek. Probably. Her skin was warmer than a Kithara should be, and her breath caught at his touch. Why don't you? Because for the first time since Earth died, I don't feel alone. The admission surprised him with its honesty. Because when I look at you, I see someone who's as lost and scared as I am. And because ... double quotes, he took a breath, steadying himself. Because I think I'm falling in love with you too. That's impossible. The bond creates artificial feelings of attachment. What you think you feel isn't real. The bond you described to me was a lie, he pointed out. So how do you know what I'm really feeling? She stared at him, her violet eyes wide with something that might have been hope. CALEN ... I need to know something, he said. When your mission is complete, when you have whatever information your people sent you to get, what happens then? She struggled with the words. I was supposed to disappear, find a way back to the Nihili remnant, and deliver the intelligence. And now? Now I don't know if I can. Her voice broke on the last word. I don't know if I want to. The ships. Intercom chose that moment to crackle to life, announcing their impending arrival at Kepler 442b. In 6 hours, they would be on the colony world, beginning whatever new life awaited them there. 6 hours to decide whether the fragile thing growing between them was worth the enormous risks it would require. We need to talk, Callan said. Really talk. About what this means, what we're going to do. Ayara nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Yes, but not here. Too many ears on a ship this small. The colony, then. We'll figure it out once we're planetside. As they made their way back to their quarters, Callan felt the weight of impossible choices settling on his shoulders. Love a woman who wasn't even the species she claimed to be. Trust someone who had built their entire relationship on deception. Risk his life, and possibly the lives of everyone on the colony, for the chance at something real. But as Ira's hand slipped into his in the dim corridor, he realized the choice had already been made. Asterisk. Kepler 442b was a world caught between seasons, half of its surface locked in eternal winter, the other baking under a red giant sun that never set. The human Kithara colony had been established in the narrow temperate band between these extremes, a collection of prefabricated structures and terraforming equipment that looked impossibly small against the alien landscape. Colony Administrator Thane greeted them at the landing pad, a weathered human woman whose bond partner stood silently beside her, a tall Kithara with the traditional golden eyes and serene expression. The contrast between them and Callan and Iara was stark, and he could see the administrator noting the differences. Welcome to Haven's Edge, she said, her tone professional but warm. You'll be assigned to the mineral survey team initially. The work's hard, but it's good preparation for the more advanced terraforming operations. Her gaze shifted to Iara. Your Guardian credentials indicate expertise in geological resonance analysis? Among other things, Iara replied smoothly. The perfect response, informative without being specific. Their quarters were better than the ship, but not by much. A small prefab unit with basic amenities and a shared workspace equipped with survey equipment. As soon as the door sealed behind them, Callan activated the white noise generator he'd requisitioned from the ship's quartermaster. A small precaution, but potentially vital if they were going to have sensitive conversations. Paranoid much? Iara asked, but there was approval in her voice. Learning from the best, he replied. So what's the plan? How long before your people expect results? She settled into one of the room's 2 chairs. The resonance calibrator, which he now knew, was something else entirely resting in her lap. That's complicated. I don't have direct contact with them. The plan was for me to gather intelligence over a period of years and find a way to transmit it through certain channels. Years? That surprised him. This isn't a quick smash and grab. Operation? The Kithara are too sophisticated for that. Real intelligence gathering takes time, patience, the ability to build trust and access. She looked down at the device in her hands. This isn't a resonance calibrator, by the way. It's a data storage and encryption unit, designed to look like standard Guardian equipment. What kind of data are you supposed to gather? Military deployment schedules, telepathic research protocols, weaknesses in their psychic defense networks. Her voice was clinical, detached. Information that could be used to target their colonies, disrupt their communications, maybe even launch a preemptive strike. The casual way she said it made Callan's blood run cold. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about survival. But there was no conviction in her words. My people see it as justice for what was done to us. And what do you see it as? She was quiet for a long time, staring at the device that represented everything she was supposed to be. I used to see it the same way. The Kithara destroyed our homeworld, scattered us across the galaxy, made us into refugees and outcasts. They deserved whatever we could do to them. Used to? That was before I lived among them. Before I saw that they're not the monsters my people made them out to be. She looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting the room's harsh lighting. They're flawed, sometimes arrogant, occasionally ruthless in their decisions. But they're not evil. And the humans they've taken in, you're not prisoners. You're genuinely being protected. From what? From everything else in the galaxy. Her expression darkened. The briefings you received barely scratched the surface. There are dozens of species out there that would exterminate humanity on sight if they encountered unbonded humans. The psychic radiation you emit doesn't just cause discomfort. It can trigger mass violence, psychotic breaks, even death in some telepathic species. Callan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's temperature. So the bonding, really, is necessary. Completely. Without Kithara guardians, humans would be the most hated species in the galaxy within a generation. She held up the false calibrator. And I was sent here to undermine the very system that's keeping your people alive. The weight of that revelation settled between them like a third presence in the room. Callan found himself thinking about the other colonists, the families and individuals who had come here seeking a new start after losing everything. If Ira's mission succeeded, if the Kithara protection network was compromised, ... You can't do it, he said quietly. I know. So what's the alternative? You just ... abandon your people? Pain flickered across her features. They're not really my people anymore, are they? I'm something different now. Something that doesn't fit in either world. That makes two of us. Before she could respond, their door chimed. Callan quickly shut off the white noise generator and opened it to find a young human man in survey team coveralls. Callan Reeves? I'm Marcus Webb, team leader for the Geological Survey. Thought I'd stop by and introduce myself. His smile was genuine, but there was something sharp in his eyes as they shifted to Iara. And you must be his guardian. Interesting. Coloration. Are you from one of the outer rim Kithara settlements? Something like that, Iara replied smoothly. Well, you're both scheduled for orientation tomorrow at 0800. Fair warning, the work here isn't like anything you did on Earth. The mineral compositions are unique, and we've had some unusual readings from the deeper survey sites. Unusual? How? Callan asked. Marcus glanced around as if checking for listeners. Let's just say there might be more than geological formations down there. The administrator wants all new teams to be prepared for unexpected discoveries. After he left, Callan and Iara exchanged looks. Think he suspects something? Callan asked. No, but he knows something we don't. Iara moved to their small window, gazing out at the colony's perimeter. This place feels ... wrong. There's something in the psychic background here that doesn't match what a standard colony should produce. Maybe it's whatever they're finding in the surveys. Maybe. But she didn't sound convinced. As night fell. Over the colony or what passed for night, in a world of eternal twilight. Callan found himself watching Iara as she prepared for her meditative rest. The careful ritual she went through, the way she positioned herself in the center of the room, the subtle wrongness of it all, now that he knew the truth. "Iara," he said softly, "when this is over, when we figure out what we're going to do about your mission, about us, will you tell me your real name?" She opened her violet eyes, meeting his gaze across the small room. "Zara," she said. "My real name is Zara." It fit her better than Iara ever had. As she closed her eyes again and settled into her meditation, Callan felt something shift inside him. Not the artificial bond of guardian and ward, but something deeper and more dangerous. Tomorrow, they would begin their work in the colony, start building the life they were supposed to have. But tonight, for the first time since Earth's destruction, he felt like he might have found something worth fighting for, even if that fight might cost them everything. Part 5. The Choice. Between worlds, the underground caverns of Kepler 442b held secrets that predated human civilization by millions of years. 3 weeks into their survey work, Callan and Zara, he'd started thinking of her by her real name, though she still used her cover identity with the others, descended deeper into the planet's crust than any previous team. Their assignment was routine: map the mineral deposits in Sector 7, take core samples, file a report. Standard work for a bonded pair. What they found instead was a vast crystalline chamber that sang with harmonics no human throat could produce. "Jesus," Callan breathed, his helmet light playing across formations that seemed to pulse with their own internal rhythm. "What is this place?" Zara stood frozen at the cavern's entrance, her face pale behind her visor. "It's a predecessor site," she whispered. "Callan, we need to leave. Now." But it was too late. The moment their lights had touched the crystal formations, something had awakened. The harmonics shifted, deepened, and suddenly the air itself seemed to thicken with presence. Who disturbs the deep songs? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing their systems entirely and speaking directly into their minds. Callan staggered, his hands flying to his helmet as psychic pressure unlike anything he'd ever experienced crashed into him. Beside him, Zara went rigid, her violet eyes rolling back until only white showed. When she spoke, it wasn't in her own voice. "Ancient ones, we seek only knowledge. We mean no harm to the deep places." Nihali, the presence in the cavern shifted, became more focused. "We sense the old hunger in you, child of void feeders. But changed, transformed. Why do you walk? With the warm blood, Zara?" Callan grabbed her arm, but she might as well have been carved from stone. Whatever was happening, she was completely lost in it. Her voice, when it came, was fractured, uncertain. "I don't know what I am anymore. Confusion, pain. The mixing of essences that should not mix." The presence seemed to expand, filling the cavern with its attention. "Show us. What happened next would haunt Callan's dreams for the rest of his life." The crystal formations blazed with light, and suddenly he could see not just the cavern, but the psychic landscape that overlay it. His own emotional aura, chaotic and brilliant as a solar flare. Zara's alien presence, darker and more complex, reaching toward his energy with tendrils that didn't consume, but somehow harmonized.